Welcome. Between the 12th and 15th centuries, in Latin-speaking Christian Europe, few games were as popular as chess. Possibly originating in India, chess entered Persia, that is, modern-day Iran, and from there the Arab world, before it entered Latin Christendom. Today, chess is well known, although hardly the most popular of games. But, for those at the time, chess was as serious as it was popular. Sometimes accompanied by gambling, it also inspired extended moral, political, and religious reflection. So, today, we'll look at the history of chess and then turn our attention to how medieval European Christians, from Scandinavia to Italy, thought about chess, the most philosophical of games. But what are the origins of chess? In truth, we don't know. But we can work our way backwards and get some insight into how chess spread across the world. Chess entered the medieval Roman Christian world from elsewhere, most likely Muslim Spain, and there it had been played since probably the 10th century. And chess likely entered the Muslim world from Iran, most likely after the Arab conquests of the 7th century. Iranian sources attribute the origins of chess to India, but the oldest known chess pieces actually come from what is now Uzbekistan. There are just 7 of them. All are made of ivory, and all are figural, that is, they portray human beings and other living things, such as elephants. But we find something different when we turn to Iranian chess pieces. Dating from after the rise of Islam, we find that they are abstract, that is, they lack human features. This is likely due to a general reticence among many Arab Muslims to portray human beings artistically, as this can be considered idolatrous. Figural chess sets are documented in Arab Muslim lands until at least the 10th century. But it seems that they fell out of fashion and that abstract figurines rose in popularity. The entry of chess into the Christian world was marked by a return to figural chess pieces. We'll look at some of these in a bit. More surprising for us today is probably the fact that, for many centuries, chess provided a framework for thinking about politics. It was even used to teach political theory. And no book of this sort was more popular than the Book of Chess, which was written around the year 1275 by Jacob de Casolis, a Catholic monk who lived in northern Italy. It became a wildly popular work. We know this because it was translated into numerous European languages. More than 300 manuscripts of the work survive. Keep in mind, during these centuries, books only existed because they were copied by hand. At least some of those copies have been lost to the ravages of time. So, if more than 300 manuscripts survive, this means that many more manuscripts probably once existed. Casolis began his book by explaining his reason for writing. Persuaded by the prayers of my brothers, by secular students, and other honorable people who have heard my sermons, I, Brother Jacob de Casolis, of the Dominican Order, have written this book on the game of chess. I have done it to improve our character and to teach something about our labors. I thus call it a book of manners and of the offices of the nobility. So this isn't a work of recreational or pleasure reading. We see this in the last sentence, when he writes about the offices of the nobility. The English word office comes from the Latin word officium, which means duty. In other words, Casolis's great work, the Book of Chess, is a book of ethics, and it's addressed to those in positions of political power. Casolis drew freely from several sources: the Bible, Catholic tradition, and the great authors of Roman antiquity, especially those who wrote in Latin. He used these sources to exposit each chess piece, showing how it might imitate those ideals appropriate to it. A good example can be seen in the discussion of kingship. It was widely accepted in Casolis's day that kings were earthly images of God. As Casolis wrote, In his imperial office, a king is like God. But what does this mean? One of the great temptations of political power is the temptation to tyranny. So Casolus immediately goes on to write, God, however, is truth itself. A king is second to him in virtue, deeds, and eternal truth. To further justify the view that kings should strive to imitate divine virtue, Casolus borrows from the first-century philosopher Seneca, who wrote, "Of all things, nothing befits a king as much as gentleness." And slightly later, in the same section, Casolus quotes the Bible, "My mouth will utter the truth, and my lips detest ungodliness." Still later, drawing upon ancient history, he offers further moral advice, emphasizing such things as the importance of a king remaining sexually chaste by keeping no other female company than his wife, the queen. Upon finishing his discussion of the king, he turns to the queen and then to other pieces as well. Casolus's ideal state ultimately mirrors a single side of the chessboard, in which every piece has its place and works together with every other piece to produce a harmonious whole. Kings and queens do not exploit pawns, knights remain faithful, rooks remain obedient, and so on and so forth. Like every good work of political theory, it offers a compelling vision for how things ideally should be. Casolus's name is no longer well known, but some elements of medieval chess remain famous. Today, the most well-known medieval chess pieces are probably the Lewis Chessmen. They are perhaps most recognizable due to their appearance in the film Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But the origins of the Lewis Chessmen are a mystery. We don't know who found them or when, although we do know their first public appearance was in 1831. We also know that they were found, quite by accident, on the Isle of Lewis, which is part of Scotland. But despite their name, the Lewis Chessmen are not a complete chess set. On the one hand, there are far too many pieces, 78 total. On the other hand, these 78 pieces do not yield any kind of playable complete set of pieces. It is now believed that the Lewis Chessmen are actually the remains of 4 different chess sets. Like other chess pieces from the Christian world, the Lewis chess pieces are figural. But there are elements that allow us not just to note the history of their discovery, but to place them in proximity to other chess pieces. In fact, there are similarities between the Lewis Chessmen and other Western chess pieces, specifically those from Scandinavia. For example, here is a warder, the equivalent of the rook in a modern chess set. The warder is portrayed as a berserker, that is, a Viking warrior. This particular warder has its teeth out, biting the top of its shield. This is a clear indication that the Lewis Chessmen has Scandinavian origin. The berserker eating its shield was a popular stereotype among the Scandinavians. It's an image of a warrior quite literally out of his mind with ferocity. Now, this berserker is shown clothed, but popular legend held that berserkers actually fought naked, yet another image of a warrior out of his mind, and, according to legend, out of his drawers. Let's look at another piece. The opposite of a warder is a bishop. We know this piece is a bishop from 2 features. First, the right hand is raised in blessing. 3 fingers, including the thumb, point upward, symbolizing the Christian belief in God as Trinity. The 2 fingers pointing downward symbolize the Christian belief that Jesus of Nazareth was both human and divine. The bishop's left hand holds a crozier, which looks like a shepherd's crook. The bishop in the Catholic Church is a spiritual pastor, and in fact, the English word pastor is Latin in origin. It's entered English unchanged, but in Latin it means shepherd. Unlike the other Lewis chessmen, all of whom have beards, the bishop is clean-shaven. This reveals the influence of Roman cultural norms. They considered a clean-shaven face a sign of civility. Here is a king. Bearded, he sits on his throne with a sword in his lap. The throne is intricately carved, and the robes are detailed. Although we cannot see it in this picture, the kings among the Lewis chessmen wore open crowns. This was an important bit of symbolism. The opening in the back signified a place for the church, specifically for the Pope in Rome, to have a say on religious and political matters. And this tells us something about the date of this chess set as well. It dates to sometime after the first millennium, when the Scandinavians had converted to Christianity. The queen, like the king, is seated on the throne, and like the king, her robes and throne are detailed. But there is a difference between queens in modern chess sets and those from around the time of the 12th century. Today, the queen is the most powerful piece on the chessboard. She can move in any and every direction, unlike other pieces, which have restricted movements. But back then, a queen moved just one space at a time. The power of chess queens today is due to the 15th century, when queens rose to new prominence in Latin Christian societies. So what? Chess shows us two developments equally interesting, but also quite different from one another. One is the global exchange between diverse cultures. Drawing a line from India to Iran and from there to Spain and Italy means that chess is a truly global game. It spans the Silk Road and beyond. On the other hand, the history of chess among Latin-speaking Christians can also be used to chart the history of Christian evangelism in what is now Western Europe. The most obvious sign here is the bishop, who is an official in the Catholic Church. But the first chess sets didn't have bishops. Bishops were a distinct office within Christian churches. Among Latin-speaking Christians, you might say that chess was Christianized. The presence of both Christian bishops and berserkers among the Lewis Chessmen is one illustration of an increasingly Christian culture in Northern Europe. If you're interested in learning more, these books are worth consulting. First, the Book of Chess is easily available in a translation by H.L. Williams. One benefit of this translation is that it's something of a hybrid text, for it also contains a number of woodcuts from the English translation made by William Caxton in 1474. For historical studies of chess, two books are especially helpful. One is Deborah Freeman Fahid's Chess and Other Game Pieces from Islamic Lands. Accompanied by wonderful illustrations, it tells the story of how Muslims played chess from the 7th century onward. Another book is Jenny Adams' study, Power Play, the Literature and Politics of Chess in the Late Middle Ages. It offers an engaging overview of how chess became a cultural touchstone, complete with philosophical and political meaning. Finally, for the Lewis Chessmen, see the co-edited volume, The Lewis Chessmen Unmasked, which is published by the National Museums, Scotland. It's a well-illustrated, clearly written guide to the most famous of European chess pieces. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe button, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.